People might be suggesting all these things, all these interventions, all these supplements, but at the end of the day, if you're not dealing with what's going in your mind, like the self-talk that you talk about, like how you talk about things to yourself, your negative attachments to certain things, then you're never really going to truly heal yourself.
Hey everyone, welcome back. One of my goals with this podcast is to bring you guys the latest and greatest nutrition and wellness information out there. And nutrition is a very complicated subject. I've been a student of it for many years now, and I'm still learning things every single day, and I learn things from these experts that I bring on to this podcast every single time as well. And our episode today is with Ryan Carter of Live Vitae. So in our conversations today, he answered a lot of my questions, and fair warning, he does know his stuff. So he talks in a bit more of a technical way with lots of scientific terminology. So if that scares you, hang in there, because he definitely makes it relatable, and I ask him clarifying questions about things. So overall, it was a great conversation, but let's get into it. So welcome to the podcast, Ryan.
Thank you for letting me be here today and join you in this conversation.
Oh, it's my pleasure. I'm really excited to have you share all your wisdom with all of my listeners. Can you introduce yourself really quickly to those who don't know you?
So my name is Ryan Carter. I go by the handle or the business name Live Vitae. I'm a registered nutritionist. I'm based in London, United Kingdom. I work with people one-to-one in person or also online around the world. Essentially, I have a more holistic, deeper view around about health and wellness. So going beyond the surface level stuff, getting to the evolutionary perspective, the dynamics of the energy mechanics of the human body, and going into like the nervous system, the brain, the behavioral patterns of people, essentially. I'm also a personal trainer, a breathwork practitioner as well. So there's a whole host of things going on to the bigger picture of what I do. But essentially, I help people. I reach their goals, remove the obstacles, and empower them to take back control of their health.
I also have a passion for the holistic aspect of people getting well and the wellness journey. And so I appreciate that. And I also appreciate how deep you are into the science, into the like nerding out on all the latest articles and things like that. If you don't follow Ryan already, I really recommend that you do, because you will learn something every single time he'll pop on your phone. I really love the name of your handle as well. And then I did a little bit of digging and I found out kind of the mechanics and the reason why you chose that name. Can you share it with everyone?
Yeah, so essentially it was my auntie who came up with the name. I was looking for something different instead of using my first, second name, then nutrition thrown in at the end. It stems from, Latin? So live life, live vitae. So live one's life. And that can mean multiple things for different people. But like that's dependent on your perspective of what health is all about. So it's context dependent, personalized, live life, but down to the client's perspective, essentially.
I love that you use Latin, because what you did there was you found a way to express so much with so little, and you took a different approach to our Western mindset. Like live your life, live the course of your life is what you have on your website. And I love that so much, because it's a kind of a catch-22, right? You have so much in there. You're telling people that there's a lot in there. And I think that it's a great representation of all that you do.
Thank you. It was on that premise, though, to leave it open for people to interpret it in that way and take it from whatever angle or place they're at in their journey.
Yeah, because it's all individual for each one of us, right? What wellness is and what living a good life means. It's very bio-individual, and it's very individual to all of us. And you had a very interesting and long-winded journey to your own wellness, right?
Yeah, I mean, when I think back to it, I'm incredibly grateful for the journey, even though it is very complicated, and I'm near enough all the way there, I'd say, in terms of optimal health. But it was an incredible journey, a lot of insight and knowledge acquired. And I think it's really important for practitioners, in a sense, to really have an, an experience, a sort of in the fields element, and see the struggles, the traumatic experiences, the going around in circles, going down rabbit holes, in multiple factors. So for myself, there was accumulation of issues. One of them actually, well, the starting moment was sort of like an eating disorder. Well, not sort of, it was an eating disorder where I was fixated on the number of the scale, and I got my body weight down to 55 kilos. I don't know what the conversion ratio is into pounds, but 55 kilos, that's nearly half of what I weigh right now. So pretty substantial difference in weight. So I was just fixated in terms of the tracking my weight and scale every single day. I used to do fasted cardio. I had to burn a certain amount of calories on some cardio machines, and I was just unaware of what health was all about. And then I improved that side of things, and then that brought me on to sort of like building my muscle mass up, so the bodybuilding perspective of things, increasing protein, and that led me to ingesting a huge amount of bluefin tuna, which is extremely high in mercury. So without realizing at the time that was going on. And then on top of that, at the same time, I was working for a family business, which was in an antique shop. And in this business in the shop, there was a huge amount of mold. So the basement was completely full with mold and just accumulation, the chronic exposure to mold and what it does to the human body. That just sent my body into suppression. I had all these reactions to foods, confusion, didn't even know what was going on, just felt like I was drugged essentially. So it took me a lot of guessing, going down rabbit holes to finally come to the conclusion that mold was the primary reason for my downward spiral in health. And then from that point forward, I've sort of just acquired a lot of knowledge, a lot of reading, working with practitioners myself, and just acquiring a huge understanding of health and what it's really about.
Yeah, you learned a lot. You learned a lot firsthand. When did you realize when you were talking about an eating disorder, did you have a moment that you can remember where you just realized that something was not the way it was supposed to be?
Well, this is the thing. You get caught up within yourself. You can't see the woods through there's a phrase, you can't see the woods through the trees, or the trees through the forest, or something like that. So you can't see the bigger picture of what's going on. You're in tunnel vision mode, and you're just lost, and your reality and your sense of perspective is just diminished. You're oblivious to what you're doing to yourself at the end of the day. You're fixated. So even when people or even my close friends were saying, "Oh, I think you're doing it a bit too much," I was just in denial essentially. So it took a really big moment to actually come to that realization that what I was doing was damaging my body. Literally, I was just bone. I had literally no muscle mass. I had no fat on me. And recently, I just looked at a few of the pictures. It's really scary just to see my face drawn in like that. Someone who's on some hardcore drugs, like crack or something. But that's what that's what I looked like.
And earlier you mentioned bluefin tuna. Can you explain again how you got into eating all that tuna, and what were the symptoms of the increase in mercury?
Yeah, so sushi. I used to be doing carb backloading. So that would be going low carb for the week, and then on a weekend one day I'd have a copious amount of carbohydrates. And then I just got into a routine of having sushi, making my own sushi. And there's some incredible Japanese not restaurants, but supermarkets around here. and they have incredible bluefin tuna, extremely high grade. And I just love the taste. And it was that belief that you need to have a large amount of protein, and I was probably consuming around 1 kilo of bluefin tuna per week. So not only was it kind of expensive, but it had a significant toll in terms of my health. And in terms of like the symptoms, the symptoms were a bit all over. It felt like I was drunk, I was drugged. I was very confused, frequent urination, loss of libido, poor memory, sleep disturbances, immune dysregulation, food sensitivities such as histamine reactions. And at the time there, I wasn't really doing a lot of like blood work, so I don't know in terms of what was going on in terms of like my red blood cells. But I just felt shocking, like really, really bad, and I was not a nice person to be around. So I was fairly aggressive as well. I was fairly socially isolated as well, so I wanted to be by myself a lot. And that were the main symptoms that I was experiencing.
Wow. And how was the mold? Because was that soon after or during, or
Well,
how was that?
it was during. So I was working for my family business for around 10 years. And even like when I was a young age, I was working in the shop. So there could have been like chronic exposure for a long time. Well, even like the thing with mold, it even goes through the placenta. So your mother could be passing that mold onto you as you're a fetus, essentially. So it can be a build up from a number of years. And there is some genetic susceptibility in terms of how we detoxify mold. But essentially, it was accumulation of like 8 years, or the intensity of 8 years working in my family business. And it was on top of the mercury. It was on top of the eating disorder. So literally, it was making things worse. So I wasn't in a good place to start with. And that was and the other things are basically like the nail in the coffin. So if you think of a sense of like, we get given a bucket, and over time, this bucket fills up with water. And essentially we reach our maximum capacity, and then it is like systems just break down, and I was breaking down.
What did you do to begin to kind of get yourself back into it? What did that process consist of?
Yeah, so the first step was actually to find someone who knew or understood mold issues, or had an understanding of how to toxify mold. And they have the experience. Instead of me reading all these books and guessing, essentially, I was utilizing their experience to guide me through the processes, it's so invaluable. And actually to have a second pair of eyes, and who's unbiased, and who can actually make more logical and rational decisions in terms of your health instead of yourself. So you take your bias out the equation. And it was just a slow, gradual steps in terms of removing it. So the removing thing was just obviously to get out of that family, or get out of that work, get out of the exposure first off, and then it was basically binding the systemic circulation of mycotoxins, and that was used with like activated charcoal and a few other bits and pieces. So actually, first off, after finding that person, it was testing to actually show there was actually a mold issue. If we weren't guessing this, and we were actually sure that it was the mold causing these effects, and it was. So we tested, and then, like I said, it was the binders. So there's a number of binders which work in eliminating mycotoxins from the body, utilization of them, and then just restoring energy production function in terms of like the mitochondria, and then just having faith in it, and then just letting the body do its thing and giving it the right signals to heal itself, essentially.
Okay, can you clarify what you meant by binders? Because I'm not familiar with that term.
So binders would be things like activated charcoal, even things like fiber. So they work on a charge and picking up and attaching themselves to positive charged particles. So that would be things like mycotoxins, heavy metals, and just think of it like magnets essentially. And then they would be pulling it from the bile. So the bile will come in the small intestine. And that bile essentially is what emulsifies our fats. So we are able to absorb fats and break them down in terms of circulation to lymphatic system. So we pull out the toxins from our circulatory system, and that gets extracted in our intestines, and that goes out in our feces, in our stool. So that's what binders are generally.
I see. So it's a way for your body essentially to detox.
Yeah, essentially. Yeah. So you're helping your body detoxify more efficiently. You could do that with the use of fiber to a certain extent, but you can be a bit more specific and more advanced using certain molecules to help with certain toxins.
So you're talking about activated charcoal. Do you still stand by that, like as far as its benefits to detox?
Yeah, like I think in this modern world, there's a multitude and accumulation of toxins, and we are just swimming in them. So I don't think like you should be doing like taking activated charcoal daily, but I do think like warm baths, saunas, sweating in some mechanical sweating, i.e. like running, obviously trying to choose organic food as much as possible, like even breathing. So our lungs are our way of how we detoxify as well. So just utilizing basic strategies, and then in more severe circumstances, utilizing things like binders for a short period of time.
Well, I've never actually tried activated charcoal myself, so I was just curious about that. Thanks for breaking that down. And fiber as well. Like I know that fiber helps us to reduce the cholesterol in our bodies. And so that's amazing that it also can help us detox on some level as well.
Yeah, so it's the same mechanism of how cholesterol goes out of our body in terms of our feces, and that's what binders do. So they attach onto the cholesterol, and the cholesterol will have a large portion of the fat soluble toxins. So it's the same way. So there's a medication called cholestyramine, and that was used to lower cholesterol, and it's the same thing that activated charcoal, bentonite clay, zeolite, all these sort of things do. So it's the same thing.
I see. And you actually, I saw on your website, you said that you struggled with kind of the effects of heavy antibiotics use. Is that correct?
Yeah, so I wouldn't say I was like a chronic or aggressive user of antibiotics, but I must have had them, I'd say probably about 5 times in my life. Tonsils, I went traveling in like Africa, and I took some antibiotics after that trip because I had a fairly bad stomach bug essentially. And then, yeah, just that basically wipes out our microflora, our microbiome essentially. And the microbiome is extremely complex subject essentially. So there's multiple species, and they all have a different role and purpose in the body. So when we're taking antibiotics, it's basically like a nuclear bomb for our microbiome. So if you think of like putting a bomb into a rainforest, we're going to be basically creating a big hole, and then this vacant space will become opportunistic for certain microbes and pathogens, be it parasites, be it yeasts, and they will basically do all these things to grab that foothold and take advantage of that vacant space. So then that's when things get wrong. So there may be some degrading bacteria which we actually produce B vitamins from, like biotin or vitamin K, or even like the way we assimilate nutrients as well. So, and even like the metabolites like butyric acid or hydrogen sulfide, which we need in small amounts. So we basically don't help ourselves by taking antibiotics, but of course in some situations they're needed. But generally, for most of the time, we can use other strategies to resolve these issues, but it's the awareness that that shouldn't be your primary intervention for most of the time. Like even with like viral infections, taking antibiotics is probably not a wise move either. So it only works really with bacterial issues. So there's loads of nuance there in terms of the utilization of antibiotics.
Interesting. And like you mentioned, the gut bacteria and the microbiome is a huge topic to kind of discuss. But if you're willing, to kind of take this on, do you have a quick way or some advice to repopulating that? Because I know a lot of people who have used a lot of antibiotics over their lifetime. And since you have experience, do you have an advice or anything that you would suggest for that?
Yeah, so it's not literally a sort of a premise of like we lost some, we got to replace it. And I think that's what like the probiotics or prebiotics as well go to in terms of what they promote. So we've got to think the bigger picture here. So there's the brain-gut axis, so the bidirectional pathways of how the brain, the nervous system regulates the microbiome as well. What happens on the surfaces of our body, like the skin, the lungs, the eyes, these all have an effect in terms of our microbiome. So like UVB exposure, or even like utilizing red light therapy, the same frequency or wavelengths in sunrise and sunset, these have massive effects on our microbiome species. It's able to shift certain species. Like obviously food is a good way of helping, supporting it, but we're thinking of food of like in terms of the energy production, because all cells of the body, like the epithelium, which separates us from basically the outside world, they need energy to replace themselves each day, and it's really highly demanding. So that's making sure that we have a good energy supply of producing ATP, adenosine triphosphate. And that requires certain nutrients, but also there's like the epithelial cells that are really high and dependent in like mucus, the mucus layer. And again, that's like really highly dependent on vitamin A. So retinol, the animal-based form, not really the beta carotene. Also foods like fish, shellfish, high in DHA, EPA, that's been shown to help the gut lining. And also just remembering like, it's not just the gut itself. We have other organs attached to the gut, like the liver, the pancreas, in terms of our digestive facilitation, the stomach, the way we're actually eating and consuming our food. This is going to influence our microbiome species too, because obviously there's a pH dependent factor there. And even like making sure that we actually got an acidic stomach. That's the first step, but also just the awareness about chewing our food, relaxing, being present, all these certain things that we just forget, and we think we can just solve these problems with a probiotic. And like that, I'm not trying to discredit, like that might not help, and it be like a plaster effect. So it might have a beneficial effect, but the effect will be short-lived essentially. So, and like even like modern society, we're eating on the go. Like we're always like on the move, we're eating, we're not sitting down or relaxing when we're eating, multiple meals per day, snacks. And like that was never really the case in evolution perspective. We would have had like a meal maybe once a day, or maybe we'd had a big fasting period without having to label it like an intermittent fasting thing. It just occurred. The way we sleep, the way we repair our body as well, highly dependent on a hormone called melatonin. And we know that technology, artificial light at night, these all influence our energy production. These all influence our the mechanics of how we repair ourselves, and how cells divide and how cells die and turn over essentially and recycle.
And your focus on the term energy production is important because are you saying that that's how we'll feel our best? Is when we have that?
Yeah, so like the premise of life is all about energy. So without energy, there's no order. And if there's no order, there's going to be chaos and inflammation. So and having that ability to produce energy is critical for the way we think, our visual field, so the way that we assess and sense our reality or where we are in our environment, the way that we're adaptive and resilient to stress, that's massive. So that goes back to our nervous system, the way we produce hormones, like everything in the body is dependent on energy. That's where I literally start with my clients. How well are they making energy? What seems to be the obstacle in the way of not allowing them to create energy? Is it heavy metals? Is there a mold issue? Is there bacterial infection? Are they sending the wrong signal to their bodies? I.e., are they indoors all day long? Are they doing excessive exercise? All these things will interfere with our body's way of producing energy. And of course, that's primarily facilitated with food, how well we digesting. So it's just really hard. And obviously when we have lack of energy, we have a lack of ability to repair our digestive tract, the way that we secrete enzymes. So it's like breaking that habit and giving the client the support, or the person the support, to be able to utilize the energy, digest their food. And that's the first step in terms of making change, in terms of feeling better.
You're focused on kind of the main function of our bodies, which is to create energy, and then you look at the obstacles around that. That's really a really brilliant way to get to the root of everything, of the issues. Do you have any stories or real life examples of some obstacles that your clients have faced and how they overcame those obstacles?
Yeah, so at the moment, I'm last, say, 3 weeks, I've had 6 new clients with mold issues. So that seems to be popping up all the time at the moment now. And within 1 month of working with one client in particular, she's able to sleep throughout the night now. Her cognition, her memory's improved, and she's an author. So pronounced U-turn in her health. And again, it's setting realistic expectations. So if a client comes to me with 10 years of chronic fatigue, me turning it around within 1 week is not really going to happen. So it takes time. Rome wasn't built in a day, and nor is your body. So there's a turnover and biogenesis in terms of how we make mitochondria. And this takes time to facilitate, time to repair the body, time to repair the sort of behavioral traits and thought processes that we have, which can also hold us back in terms of taking back control of our health, which is often overlooked. So people might be suggesting all these things, all these interventions, all these supplements, but at the end of the day, if you're not dealing with what's going in your mind, the self-talk that you talk about, how you talk about things to yourself, your negative attachments to certain things, then you're never really going to truly heal yourself. And I think that's the most overlooked thing. But that's what I get to, seeing the bigger picture. Every aspect of health comes into mind and when I work with clients.
Absolutely. I'm glad that you're mentioning the mental self-talk, and because it's so important. How are some ways that mental self-talk, negative self-talk, can manifest in someone's daily life?
That's a great question. So I think it's very subtle, small things. So the constant thing that you're not good enough, that you always have to have more, you always have to be better and aiming for perfect. We set unrealistic expectations of ourselves. Everything now is instant gratification, for example. And that's could be said for our food system. Everything now is just cooked in 1 minute. Everything now is delivered on your doorstep from your mobile. So everything is now. And that is not how humans evolved, and that's not how humans function. It takes time as a process. And that's when we really reap the benefits of that gradual, step-by-step process of linking the physical and mental together. That could also be done from how much, or the way we compare ourselves to everybody else as well. So be it your friends or friends of friends, or whether it's these influencers, celebrities. Like that comes back to like the idea of having more, and more's better, and materialistic things. And that comes back to like your purpose and setting up your purpose, what you want to achieve, and really understanding that and driving that home, because that will affect like your daily habits, like these small little things that you can tick off, be it with just like journaling first thing in the morning, spending an hour to yourself reading, and I think like having that morning set up so you actually achieving a few things in the morning, and that really sets up your day. Like I think Tony Robbins uses the approach like success leaves clues, and like all basically high performing people have certain rituals, and a large amount of them will have like morning rituals of like, yes, making the bed first thing, that sets you up. Just like small easy wins, having breakfast ready and sorted, like maybe a few things done the night before, knowing what you're going to be doing for the day, so like you've done your to-do list out the night before, just setting yourself up to win, essentially.
I love that. Something that I personally do whenever I'm getting negative or in my head is I hold on to this idea of becoming. Like it's not going to come overnight, because we're all perfectionists. We all want to live the best life and be the best version of ourselves today, right now. And I completely agree with your ideas for like making your bed in the morning and doing that productivity routine. But even if I find myself in a moment where I'm not being absolutely on my best behavior and being very mean to myself in my head, I just try to remember that, really finding that smile. Like the science shows that there's a huge impact of your cellular function and your bodily function based on how you think and how positive you are and optimistic you are, and how there's even a link to the length of your telomeres based on if you're a positive mindset kind of person. So I try to take deep breaths and remind myself that everything is going to happen in its own time and its own way. And do you have anything like that you do that kind of, whenever you're in that mode, do you have anything that you do that you can quickly like reset and step back into a more positive method?
Like for me, it would be like to immerse myself in nature, look into breath work, listen to Joe Dispenza for a few minutes or something like that, and just to ground myself and remind myself of what I'm grateful for, and just see how blessed I am. Like even like the way that you're created, like you've gone up against like millions of eggs that your mother's had and sperm, and you're alive basically, and it's a blessing. Like it truly is. And like I think like when you just think of positive thoughts, I think it's easy, they just go, and they're short lived. So I'd really like go like be grateful for something, like truly dig deep, and like I find, and I struggle with this still. Like I'm not perfect in any aspect. So like I still beat myself up over, or I might have some limiting beliefs now and then. They still creep into me. But I think it's just important to just like feel your emotions as well. It's very easy just to dismiss them, put them underneath the rug or a carpet, and then like, okay, yeah, but like actually feel them, feel what you're going through. Like perhaps write it down as well. Remind yourself of it, instead of just like bottling it up, or even if you have the ability to share it with someone, I think that's really powerful too.
That was really, really great. There's something that you said earlier that I wanted to ask you about. You mentioned excessive exercising. I don't really hear that term be used a lot. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, so essentially that would be creating pseudo-hypoxia in your digestive tract. So so essentially exercising too much is extremely stressful for your nervous system. So we've got an increase in glucose around the body. We've got an increase in things like cortisol, and essentially they are going to be diverting blood energy away for your digestive tract. So essentially, especially when most people think of having a post-workout meal right after exercise, that's probably the worst thing that you could probably be doing. So your intestinal tract's probably like starving of oxygen because your blood's going around the peripheral system and it's not going to be in your digestive tract. And that can be shown from certain elite performance athletes that have a completely different bacteria or microbiome compared to the general public. So there's a big difference there. And whether it's they're trying to extract as much calories or energy from the foods as possible, or whether they're trying to enhance their metabolites, be it with like hydrogen sulfide or methane, whatever it could be, excessive exercise is going to be putting you towards a sympathetic state, so a more stressful state. So it's just like more is not necessarily better. And that could be applied with everything. If you're too critical of your diet, the food you're consuming, again, we're going to go down the same pathway, activating your limbic system, part of your brain, which is the base of where it goes down to your nervous system, or if it's going to be stimulating your hypothalamus, pituitary adrenal axis.
Wow, what you said about not having a meal right after exercising kind of dropped my jaw a bit, because I've never heard that. So you're saying that it's too much for your body to handle at that moment, and that you should wait a little bit longer until you eat?
Yeah, so I would say like half an hour to an hour will probably be a more ideal time to have something after training. Again, like if we're just talking like walking in the park, then like you don't need to worry about that. But if we're talking about like an hour run or cardio, or if you've just been lifting weights, give your body some time to like deal with that. Let your heart rate drop a little bit, let your blood pressure come down, let your blood sort of redistribute, and then have some food. Obviously there's some nuance there, like perhaps having a liquid meal would be like more easier to digest because you don't have to break it down to a certain extent. But again, the thing with the liquid meal is that's quick fuel going straight into your blood, essentially. It's quickly digested and assimilated, so you could therefore get a spike in glucose and all these things.
I see. I like listening to you talk and also following you, because you have a lot of different perspectives that are kind of underground. You even mentioned something that I want to ask you about a while ago, which was about juicing, and how juicing isn't maybe the best idea. Like, can you break it down? Like, how much juicing should we aim for, or is it even worth it? What are your thoughts about juicing?
Yeah, so juicing. I don't think it's like, so we have to go back. Remember, having a concentrated amount of celery is physiologically like powerful to a certain extent. There'll be no way of you having like 2 heads of celery or being able to digest like even 1 head of celery in one go. No way. So the belief that you could juice that up and have it in a liquefied form doesn't really make any sense when you think of food in that whole form. That would be me, like, for example, the other spectrum would be to puree a fillet steak, for example, and have that down as a steak, a smoothie, a fillet smoothie, basically. It doesn't really make sense. And especially like fruit or vegetables come in its whole form, so we're missing out on some of that fiber. Again, it's subjective how much fiber we actually do need to consume. There's some instances where fiber could be more problematic for some people. So essentially there's no one answer, but I think that the concentration that certain vegetables, not necessarily fruit, but certain vegetables, things like spinach, chard, kale, they do contain anti-nutrients, so things like oxalates, lectins, tannins. These all can interfere with thyroid's dynamics. You need adequate nutrients status to be able to metabolize oxalates. So if you're deficient in certain nutrients, then it's going to be more of a problem, and especially if there's like digestive issues there as well. It's going to be like open doors for these compounds to enter your blood, with your circulation, and then allow to be deposited in your nervous system, in your kidneys, even in your brain, in your adrenals. So there's a problem there, and there tends to be a more gut healing aspect of juices, that these are good for your gut health, when in fact it's probably the worst, not maybe the worst thing, like the worst thing would be eating like junk food, but like the worst thing would be, it would be one of the worst things to be doing. You're sort of giving yourself like low grade poisoning from the concentrated amount of these molecules essentially. But when we're thinking like an average serving, or be it spinach, be it with kale, then there shouldn't really be an issue. And again, like, we've never had juiced kale or spinach ever. So it doesn't really make sense from that point of view to be going on that sort of bandwagon, essentially.
I see. And some of my listeners are more beginner level of kind of nutrition and wellness. Can you explain what you meant by anti-nutrients?
So these essentially just inhibit absorption of other molecules, more important molecules. So when we're thinking of vitamins, minerals, so things like magnesium, zinc, copper, manganese, these are going to be competing for the binding sites, the transporters of the way that we assimilate and digest these molecules. So things like phytic acid, which is in grains, nuts and seeds, they're going to be competing with zinc. So there was a study which showed that, I think it was having crackers maybe, or I think it was something like that, crackers with oysters, it inhibited the absorption of the zinc in the oysters. And zinc's an important nutrient, especially when we're dealing with things like mercury toxicity, which is a competitive molecule for zinc as well. And with the immune system as well. So all these things come into an issue when we're talking about the high concentration amounts of juices. But like, if you're having the occasional juice with probably a little bit more fruit opposed to eating raw vegetables, then I don't think there's an issue per se. But again, ideally it would be eating the whole fruit, the whole vegetables. Because it's going to provide the fiber, it's going to be more satiating. So there's that aspect there as well.
Yeah, like you said earlier, everything can go into extremes. And if someone's extreme juicing, maybe all the time, that they're probably having some high amounts of these anti-nutrients that are inhibiting their ability to absorb these important other nutrients like zinc and magnesium. So that's a pretty interesting misconception that I've heard about. Do you have any other misconceptions that many people like come to you talking about on the top of your head that you're always, hearing about?
Like, typically people take too much supplements, and the wrong type of supplements to a large degree. So you're guessing and you're just throwing more things in. So we can actually quantify some stuff, see what actually your body needs. So I'm a big fan of the organic acid test, which looks at metabolites, 75 metabolites, and that could give us a more quantified way of looking at what your body actually needs. So that's removing the guesswork, and testing facilitates that. That meat is bad, and also it's problematic for the environment. Like there's loads of controversy around that premise. In short, it's not true. Humans need animal-based foods because animal-based foods are superior. There's context to that in terms of if you live in the equator in the tropics, then you could probably get away with more plants and vegetation, and you could probably be less reliant on animal foods. But predominantly most people are not living like that. And generally most of the health and wellness industry is from a westernized society. So that's definitely not the case with most people. That Another misconception would be diet alone is all you need to focus on. That's not true. It's that bigger picture of stress, sleep, community, but also the environment. So light exposure, circadian rhythm, all these things, movement, laughing, learning, having purpose. These are often overlooked and not thought of, and it's just more about diets. Another conception would be like a calorie is a calorie, which is just laughable because there's no such thing in physiology in terms of a calorie. It doesn't enter anywhere. There's no such thing in human metabolism of calorie.
I love that one. That's a great one.
But it's true. It's like a calorie. It doesn't mean that there's no premise to it. It doesn't mean that it doesn't mean anything. It does mean something, but the meaning of it in terms of the human body is not true, essentially. Having high cholesterol, again, I think like worrying about your cholesterol is sort of short-sighted.
You mean cholesterol consumption or just
someone's... Both, like either cholesterol consumption in high cholesterol foods, like I said, the fear-mongering about animal foods and raising cholesterol or eating animal fats is a short-sighted, simplistic view of looking at things. And again, even like if you have high cholesterol in your body, it doesn't mean that there's problems either. There could be a multitude of reasons why. And actually, cholesterol is a protective element too. So there's nuance around that. So having high cholesterol is not suggestive that there's like cardiovascular disease risks. We can look at other markers which are more suggestive of that, like red blood cell distribution width, for example. I think there's a few there.
Yeah.
Or you can out exercise a bad diet. That's another one.
Yeah, you mentioned something where you say that you don't have to count calories to lose weight as well. That's something that I think is a big idea.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, so it's a simplistic view of looking at things like count your calories, energy in, energy out. But what happens in the middle there? Can we actually measure energy in the human body? Quantifiably, we cannot yet. We have not found a metric to measure energy in the human body. So then there's this someone telling you their energy in, energy out. But what is energy in the human body? No one has actually quantified that. So it's laughable with that suggestion. And again, like humans 100 years ago had no obesity issues. They had no modern diseases. Yet we're counting calories more so now, pay more attention to detail with nutrition science. Yet there's an epidemic of health problems. Like perhaps it's not all about the calories. Like we're living in an extreme toxic world, be it with artificial light, like flashed upon us every single second of the day. We're indoors much more. Like for me, it's all about, I think we're more malnutritioned, and it's actually a thing called type B malnutrition, especially in Western societies, in a more modernized world. So there's an abundant supply of calories, but we're actually on a shortfall of nutrients, things like B1, which facilitates the entry of pyruvate to go and to create acetyl-CoA, and then like the energy mechanics essentially, instead of going down rabbit holes with that. So like we need copious amounts of B1, especially in the glycolytic pathway, so the glucose metabolism as well. Are we even like the way we handle oxygen? So we need oxygen to enter the mitochondria, and if there's no oxygen entering the cell, the mitochondria, then there's no way of us producing energy. It's as simple as that. And that could occur for a number of reasons. Like you could be anemic, but not the most typical thing of people think being iron deficient anemia. It's literally like copper as well. Copper is deficient in our diets nowadays, and that would be based on soil. The content of copper in soil is diminished. And the use of antibiotics as well, glyphosate, all these things. just going back to your point, sorry.
No, it's okay. I feel like you have, it's such a nuanced and complicated subject, and the science is always growing. And something I know that they teach in medical school too is like half of what you learn today is going to be disproven in like 10 years. There's a half-life to the science of everything, and I think that it's really important that you are, you're removing the middleman and you're giving people direct information. You're always reading about the latest science and you're immersed in it, and you're giving people kind of the latest. So everyone should follow you on Instagram as my recommendation, because it's such a complicated subject, and it takes us 7 times to hear something to actually remember it, right? So it's a process for someone who's just starting their wellness journey to learn about this really complicated, nuanced subject of nutrition and diet and lifestyle, and it can be very overwhelming for sure.
Yeah, 100%. There's so much information out there. Like, you're not short of information, and like you pointed out, nutrition is not black and white. And listen to what somebody says about the keto diet, or what someone says about this kind of exercise is great for you, whatever. Like, you need to have critical thinking there. It needs to be applied for, and you need to apply it in terms of your circumstances, like your age, your gender, like even for females, what time of month is it? These sort of scenarios that we need to think about. And then that's what I'm able to do, is like bridge the gap, connect the dots, and to decipher all the information, and then to point and guide you, not bark orders to you, but to guide you, handheld you in this empowering method about learning about your body, learning about health, what you really need to know, what really is important, because like 99% of the stuff out there is just a lot of fluff, and there's only like one or two things which can actually really move the needle, and then the rest of the time it's just fine tuning a few things. But that comes with experience and knowing what to look out for, and using some tests and using symptoms and quantitative self-subjective data as well.
Absolutely. And I feel like a good way for someone to, if they're really facing kind of an overwhelming health scenario like you experience with mold or something, is really find an expert. So can you kind of tell everyone where people can find you and what kind of services you offer in case someone wanted to work with you to help them with something like that?
Yeah, sure. So my website, which is www.livevitae.com. So that's LIVEVITAE. And Instagram, same thing, Live Vitae. My services are on my website, so you can find everything there. And also you can I think it's really important as well. So when I started my journey essentially of finding a practitioner, it was very confusing. There's so many people out there. And I believe that the power should really go back to the client. So I have a 15-minute complimentary discovery call. So it's a chance for you to like open up the floor and answer, give me some questions, find out if you think I'm really going to help you and move the needle in terms of your health. Am I someone that you are aligned with, that you're going to get on with? So I think that's really important. So just don't go with someone for their name, but find out more about them, understand what they're going to give you, the pros and cons of working with them, the time frame that they've visualized, where you're going to get some benefit or improvement in your health and your outcomes. So there's a complimentary discovery call on my website, which you can click in and get access to my calendar on there.
That's wonderful. Well, thank you so much for coming on today and having this conversation with me. I definitely learned a couple things. So I know the people listening are learning a couple things as well.
Thank you. It's been amazing to talk to you as well.
Alrighty, everyone. That's it. That was our episode. And let me know, did you learn something? I'd love if you shared it with your friends on your stories or Instagram and tagged me or messaged me there or whatever it is. I'd love to know if you've learned anything or have implemented anything or changed your mind about things. I would be so honored if you could share this podcast if you found it at all helpful. But most importantly, be well.